The smell of old money isn't what you'd expect. It's not crisp bills or expensive cologne. It's the scent of damp wool, decaying parchment, and the metallic tang of a safe that hasn't been opened since the Berlin Wall fell. I was sitting in the middle of the library at the Sterling Estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, surrounded by the debris of my father's life. Outside, the autumn rain was lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the manicured lawn into a swamp. I wasn't looking at the rain, though. I was focused on a 50mm Summicron lens, gently wiping a microscopic speck of dust from the glass with a specialized silk cloth. It's a job that requires a steady hand. If you're off by a fraction of a millimeter, the focus is ruined. Forever. Sloan, for God's sake, put that toy away. We have work to do. I didn't look up. I knew that voice. It was sharp, entitled, and carried the weight of a woman who had never worked a day in her 52 years. My stepmother, Victoria. Behind her stood my half-brother, Julian, looking at his reflection in a gilded mirror and adjusting a silk tie that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "It's not a toy, Victoria," I said, my voice low and dry. "It's a tool. It sees things the human eye chooses to ignore." "Much like I do." "Well, start seeing the exit sign," Julian chimed in, turning around with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "The lawyer just left. The codicil is clear. The house, the liquid assets, and the primary business shares go to Mom and me. You get the archival leftovers and the unspecified contents of the basement and the storage units in Jersey. Oh, and you have exactly 48 hours to clear it all out before the New York auction house arrives too. Catalog the real valuables." I finally put the lens down. I looked at Julian. He was 24, fueled by protein shakes and his mother's vanity. My father, Silas Sterling, had been a titan of industry, a man who built a shipping empire from a single rusty tugboat. He was also a man who, in his final years of dementia, was manipulated into signing documents he couldn't even read. I knew it. They knew it. But in the eyes of the probate court, the paperwork was king. "Archival leftovers," I repeated, tasting the words. "And the unspecified contents of the storage units. That's the official ruling." Victoria stepped forward, her heels clicking on the mahogany floor like a death sentence. "That's what the will says, Sloan. You were always the difficult child. The one who wanted to go into forensics and asset recovery instead of joining the family board. So enjoy your boxes of old tax returns and broken furniture. We're moving the furniture into the penthouse on Park Avenue. You can take the trash. I mean, the thing is, people like Victoria and Julian only see what sparkles. They see the diamonds, the gold-plated faucets, and the Italian leather. They don't understand that the real value of an empire isn't in the throne. It's in the ledgers. It's in the things they dismissed as trash." "I accept," I said. Julian laughed. A short, bark-like sound. "You accept?" "You don't have a choice, sis. It's legally binding." "No, I mean, I accept the task," I said, standing up and carefully placing my Leica back into its leather case. "Since I'm a professional liquidator, I'll handle my leftovers with the same precision I applied to my clients. I will inventory every single item in the basement and those storage units. I'll clear the premises by Sunday night. But according to the right of appraisal clause in that will you love so much, I get to stay in the house until the last item belonging to me is removed. Is that understood?" Victoria narrowed her eyes. She wanted me out 5 minutes ago so she could start redecorating with the money she hadn't earned yet. But she knew the law, at least the parts her lawyer had highlighted. "Fine," she spat. 48 hours, not a second more. "And don't you dare touch the safes or the art in the gallery. We've had the codes changed." "I wouldn't dream of it," I said, a faint, cold smile touching my lips. "I only want what's mine." As they swept out of the room, Julian called back over his shoulder, "Don't forget to take the old filing cabinets in the sub-basement, Sloan. They're taking up space for my new gym." I waited until I heard their footsteps disappear up the grand staircase. Then I took a deep breath. The ionized air from the rain outside was creeping into the room. I walked over to the library's main desk, the one my father had used for 40 years. I didn't open the drawers. I didn't need to. I knelt down and felt along the underside of the heavy oak desk. There, tucked behind a structural brace, was a small, high-frequency RFID tag. I tapped my phone against it. A screen on my phone flickered to life. It was an encrypted server log. My father was a lot of things, but he wasn't a fool. Even as his mind began to fray, his survival instinct remained. He knew Victoria was poisoning his legacy. He spent the last year of his lucidity working with me in secret to create what he called the black box. He didn't hide his wealth in gold bars. He hid it in the one place he knew Julian and Victoria would never look: the bureaucracy. The archival leftovers weren't just old tax returns. They were the keys to a series of shell companies, offshore accounts, and most importantly, the unclaimed property filings that he deliberately let lapse. Under U.S. law, specifically the escapement protocols, if property isn't claimed after a certain period, it goes to the state. But if you have the original series of certificates and the notarized reinstatement forms, you can pull that wealth back like a fish on a hook. And guess who held the only authorized power of attorney to claim unspecified archival assets? Me. I headed down to the sub-basement. It was a cold, windowless concrete vault. It smelled like mothballs and damp cardboard. There were hundreds of boxes stacked 10 feet high. Hi! To Julian, this was junk. To me, it was a high-resolution map of a billion-dollar betrayal. I pulled out my phone and opened the Office Justice Toolkit, a custom suite of software ID developed for asset tracing. I started scanning the barcodes on the old filing cabinets. Beep, beep, beep. On the fourth cabinet, the scanner turned green. I pulled open the drawer. It was filled with folders labeled 1994 Shipping Manifests Mediterranean. I reached all the way to the back, to the dead space behind the sliding track. My fingers touched something cold. Metal. It was a small titanium briefcase. It was locked with a biometric scanner. I pressed my thumb against the glass. The light stayed red. Then I realized my father hadn't used his own thumb, he'd used mine. He'd programmed this 3 years ago, during that vacation to Zurich that Victoria thought was just for his health. Click. The case hissed as the seal broke. Inside wasn't money. It was a stack of original land deeds for a series of deep-water ports in Virginia and Delaware. These ports were currently being used by the family business Sterling Global. According to the will, Julian and Victoria got the business, but the business didn't own the land. They leased it from a holding company called Archival. And according to the documents in this trash box, I was the sole owner of Archival. I felt a surge of adrenaline, the kind you get when you finally find the dead pixel in a corrupted image. Victoria and Julian had the title of owners. But on Monday morning, they were going to find out that their business was sitting on land owned by the daughter they'd just evicted. I looked at my watch. 11:45 p.m. I had 47 hours left. I picked up a heavy, old-fashioned stapler and began to organize my documents. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to follow their eviction notice to the letter. I was going to remove every single archival leftover, including the proprietary software licenses and the server. Cold storage keys that ran the entire logistics network of Sterling Global. They wanted the house. They could have it. But they were going to find out that a house without a foundation is just a very expensive pile of bricks. Anyway, the rain started to get heavier, hammering the house like it was trying to break in. I didn't mind. I had a lot of trash to sort through, and I've always been very, very good at recycling. I had a lot of trickling. The next 48 hours weren't just going to be a move. They were going to be a systematic dismantling of a dynasty. The hum of the server rack in the corner was the only thing keeping me company. It was a low, rhythmic vibration that most people would find annoying, but to me, it sounded like a countdown. I was holding my Leica M3, looking through the viewfinder at a stack of dusty boxes. I wasn't taking photos for memories. I was documenting the exact state of every single archival leftover I was about to remove. You see, Julian wanted his gym. He'd been very specific about clearing the floor space. Honestly, Sloan, I don't care if you burn it all in the driveway, he'd told me earlier that evening. Leaning against the doorframe while nursing a glass of 20-year-old scotch that he definitely didn't appreciate. Just make sure the sub-basement is empty by Sunday. I've got a contractor coming in on Monday to install the sauna. Empty, Julian. Every single thing that belongs to the archives and unspecified contents. I'd asked, my finger tracing the edge of a server cooling fan. Every single thing, he'd snapped. If it's not a piece of furniture listed in the main house inventory, it's yours. Get it out or it goes to the dump. I mean, the kid really should have read the technical specs of the house. Or at least the utility contracts. The Sterling Global Logistics empire didn't just run on spreadsheets. It ran on a dedicated high-speed fiber optic line that bypassed the standard local infrastructure. To ensure uninterrupted connectivity during Father's final years, he'd had the primary network hub installed right here in the sub-basement. According to the blueprints, the entire hub, including the custom-built liquid cooling system and the auxiliary power units, was categorized under specialized archival storage infrastructure. It wasn't furniture. It was unspecified contents. I pulled out a specialized set of torque screwdrivers. I've always liked the way high-grade steel feels against a precision screw. It's a clean mechanical interaction. No lies, no fake smiles, just torque and resistance. I started with the primary server blades. These weren't just metal boxes. They held the proprietary routing algorithms that managed over 400 shipping containers currently moving across the Atlantic. If these blades were removed, the Sterling Global Logistics dashboard wouldn't just go dark, it would lose the handshake protocols with the port authorities in Rotterdam and Singapore. By 5 a.m., I had the first 3 blades packed into anti-static foam. Next came the cooling system. Julian wanted the floor clear. Fine. I'd take the 3,000-pound industrial chiller unit that was bolted to the floor. It was technically part of the storage environment control system. Without it, any backup servers Victoria tried to spin up in the upstairs office would overheat and melt within 20 minutes of a heavy data load. The rain finally stopped as the sun started to bleed through the gray Connecticut clouds. I walked upstairs to the kitchen, my boots echoing on the marble. Victoria was there, wrapped in a silk robe, looking like she'd just spent a fortune on a facial she didn't need. "Still here, Sloan?" she asked, not looking up from her iPad. "I thought I heard some banging downstairs." "Try not to scratch the floors when you're hauling your trash out. Just following Julian's orders, Victoria," I said, pouring myself an espresso. I didn't add sugar. I like the bitterness. It keeps the focus sharp. He was very insistent that I don't leave a single archival item behind. It's a big job, but I'm a professional. Good, because the auction house is coming at 9 a.m. on Monday to take the real valuables. I don't want them seeing your dusty boxes. "Oh, don't worry," I said, taking a slow sip. "By Monday morning, this house is going to feel very spacious, almost empty." She finally looked at me, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "What does that mean?" "It means that Father always said a house is only as good as what's hidden in the walls. I'm just making sure I don't leave any of my junk behind to clutter your new life." The thing about people like Victoria is that they don't understand the difference between value and utility. She thought the value was in the gold leaf frames in the gallery. She didn't realize the utility was in the digital cold storage keys currently sitting in my pocket. Saturday afternoon was the turning point. I'd hired a specialized data center decommissioning crew. They didn't look like movers. They looked like a SWAT team for computers. They arrived in 3 unmarked white vans. Julian came down to watch, a smug grin on his face. "Wow, Sloan! All this for some old files. You really are obsessed with the past. Precision is never an obsession, Julian." "It's a requirement," I said, watching as the crew began to unbolt the primary fiber optic junction box from the wall. "Hey, what are they doing with that?" Julian asked, pointing at the wires. "Isn't that the internet? This?" "No, this is the proprietary archival data transmission hub," I lied, my voice as flat as a grave. "It was part of Father's private project. Since it's not listed as a household utility in the probate schedule, it falls under unspecified contents." "You said you wanted the floor clear for your sauna, remember?" Julian shrugged. "Whatever, just make sure the Wi-Fi still works upstairs. I'm hosting a victory party tonight for some of the board members. I need to stream the market updates. The Wi-Fi will work," I said, and it would. For about 80 more hours, until the lease expiration signal I'd programmed into the router kicked in. As the crew hauled the heavy cooling units out, I went back to the library. I had one more thing to do. I pulled out my father's old 1950s Leica M3. I spent 20 minutes cleaning the lens, the silk cloth moving in perfect circles. It was a ritual of patience. I looked through the viewfinder at the portrait of my father hanging over the fireplace. Victoria had already put a post-it note on the frame that said, "Auction Lot 42." "You missed the most important part, Dad," I whispered. I walked over to the portrait. I didn't touch the frame. Instead, I looked at the wallpaper behind it. There was a tiny, almost invisible seam in the silk-screened pattern. My father had been a master of the hidden compartment. I pressed a specific sequence on the wall. A small motorized panel slid back, revealing a single, physical key, an old-fashioned brass skeleton key, and a USB drive. This wasn't digital. This was the dead man's switch for the land titles I'd defound earlier. See, Hess's Arkhaven, the company that owned the land under the ports, had a very specific clause in its bylaws. The land wasn't just leased to Sterling Global. It was granted use, as long as the majority shareholder of Sterling Global was a direct linear heir who maintained operational continuity. By evicting me, the only person who actually knew how to run the logistics network, and by planning to sell the business shares to an outside auction house, Victoria and Julian were technically breaking continuity. The moment the auction gavel hit the table on Monday, the land title would automatically revert to a private conservation trust managed by, you guessed it, me. I tucked the key and the drive into my case. Saturday night was a nightmare of loud music and expensive champagne. I stayed in the basement, the only room that was now completely eerily empty. I could hear the bass thumping through the floorboards. Julian was upstairs, bragging to the board members about how he was going to modernize the company. He didn't realize that the modernization he was talking about was currently being loaded into a climate-controlled warehouse in Newark. At exactly 2 a.m. on Sunday, I walked out the front door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I just handed the gate remote to the sleepy security guard. "Tell Mrs. Sterling the basement is empty," I told him. Just like she wanted. I drove away, the rain starting up again. I checked my phone. The connection status for Sterling Global's main servers was showing a yellow warning light. In 6 hours, when the cooling failure sensors triggered the emergency shutdown, that light would turn red. And on Monday morning, when the auctioneers arrived to sell off the valuables, they were going to find a house that was technically a shell. No internet, no servers, no cooling. An illegal landmine buried so deep that even their most expensive lawyers wouldn't find it until it was far too late. I mean, honestly, I was just taking the trash out. Monday morning didn't arrive with a sunrise. It arrived with a funeral-grade silence that felt like a physical weight on the chest. I was sitting in a small, windowless office I'd rented in a gray brick industrial park near the Newark docks. The air smelled of burnt coffee and ozone, a stark contrast to the lavender-scented halls of the Greenwich mansion. On the desk in front of me sat my Leica M3 fully reassembled and 3 monitors glowing with the frantic, red-coated data streams of Sterling Global's crumbling empire. I mean, the thing is, people like Julian believe that leadership is about the title on the door. They don't understand that a modern logistics company is just a very complex, very fragile set of handshakes between servers that don't care about your last name. By 8:45 a.m., the first panic call hit the public airwaves. Sterling Global's tracking portal was down. For a company that handles 10% of the Eastern Seaboard's intermodal freight, down isn't a glitch. It's a cardiac arrest. Thousands of shipping containers filled with everything from high-end electronics to perishable pharmaceuticals were suddenly ghosts, without the proprietary routing algorithms. I'd moved into my archival storage. The port cranes in Virginia and Delaware didn't know which box belonged to which truck. The system was blind. I leaned back, watching the server timeout errors pile up on my screen. It was almost poetic. Back in Greenwich, I knew exactly what was happening. The auction house representatives would be standing in the foyer, their pristine tablets ready to catalog the real valuables. Victoria would be trying to offer them mimosas, her hands shaking as she realized the Wi-Fi wasn't just spotty, it was non-existent. The smart home system, the climate control, the security cameras, all of it had been routed through the sub-basement hub. When I took the trash, I took the nervous system of the house. Around 10:30 a.m., my burner phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew the desperation behind it. Sloan, pick up the damn phone." It was Julian. His voice was 3 octaves higher than usual, vibrating with a kind of hysterical rage that only the truly incompetent can manage. "Hello, Julian," I said, my voice as steady as a heart monitor. "I'm a bit busy with my archival leftovers. Is there something you need?" "The servers are gone, Sloan." The IT guys from the city just got to the sub-basement and they said someone literally unbolted the entire network backbone. They said the fiber optic lines were professionally terminated and capped. "You stole company property." "Julian, let's be very precise here," I said, tapping a pen against the desk. I didn't steal anything. I followed your direct recorded order. You told me, and I quote, to remove every single thing that isn't furniture. The server racks, the liquid cooling units, and the proprietary transmission hubs were listed in Father S 2021 Asset Codicil as specialized archival equipment. Since they weren't in the main house inventory, they were mine. I was just being efficient. You bitch! You've frozen the entire fleet. There are ships sitting outside the harbor that can't even dock because the manifest codes are in those servers. Do you have any idea what the daily demurrage fees are? We're losing $400,000 an hour. Actually, Julian, it's closer to $600,000 if you factor in the perishable spoilage in the refrigerated units. I corrected him. Anyway, as you said, I should adapt, or go extinct. I decided to adapt. I'm currently looking at the lease agreements for the land the containers are sitting on. It seems the landlord is quite concerned about the lack of operational continuity. There was a long, jagged silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears in his head grinding, trying to process a reality that didn't involve a silver spoon. What land? He whispered. The ports, Julian. The ground Sterling Global sits on. It turns out Father didn't own the dirt. S. Archival does. And SS Archival just issued a notice of default to Sterling Global for violating the environmental and technical safety clauses in the lease. You see, a port without a functioning manifest system is a fire hazard. And I'm the one who has to sign off on the safety audit. How much? Victoria's voice suddenly cut in. She must have been hovering over his shoulder. She sounded older, sharper. How much do you want to bring the servers back, Sloan? Give us a number and stop this theater. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile an auditor gives when the numbers finally balance. It's not about the money, Victoria. It's about the trash. You told me I had 48 hours to clear out the leftovers. I did. I don't want to bring them back. They're safely stored in a Tier 4 secure facility under a 10-year litigation hold. If you want access to those algorithms, you'll have to go through the probate court to prove they aren't archival. That will take months, Julian screamed. Years, actually, I said. By which time Sterling Global will be a footnote in a bankruptcy textbook. But there is another way. What? Victoria asked, her voice breathless. The codicil you and Julian had Father sign while he was too confused to know his own name? The one that gave you the house and the primary shares? I want it rescinded, voluntarily. I want a full confession of the undue influence you used, notarized and delivered to the district attorney. In exchange, I might grant SS Archival a temporary waiver to allow a third-party logistics firm to clear your backlog, so the company doesn't completely implode. You're insane, Victoria hissed. We'll lose everything. You've already lost everything, Victoria. You just haven't realized the trash has already been collected. I hung up. I spent the next 6 hours watching the fallout. It was a beautiful, chaotic dance of corporate panic. The board members were jumping ship. The stock price was into a terminal nosedive. By 4 p.m., the New York Times was running a headline about the digital ghost in the Sterling Empire. But the final blow didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened at the mansion. I drove back to Greenwich at sunset. The rain had started again, a light mist that made the driveway look like glass. I wasn't alone. I had 2 black SUVs behind me, the specialized legal team and the county bailiffs. Victoria was standing on the porch, still in her silk robe, clutching a glass of wine like it was a life preserver. Julian was sitting on the steps, his head in his hands. The auction house truck was still there, but the movers were just standing around, looking at their phones. I stepped out of the car. I wasn't carrying a briefcase. I was carrying my father's old 1950s Leica. What are you doing here, Sloan? Victoria asked, her voice dead. Haven't you done enough? I'm here to finish the inventory, I said. I looked at the bailiff. He stepped forward and handed her a bright orange document. Notice of immediate eviction and asset seizure, the bailiff said, based on the emergency probate audit filed this morning. The undue influence investigation has triggered a temporary freeze on all estate transfers. Since this house is owned by the Sterling Trust and the trust is currently under investigation for fraud, nobody stays here. Fraud? Julian looked up, his face pale. We didn't do anything. The digital audit of Father's medical records said otherwise, Julian, I said, walking past him up the stairs. You forgot that his smartwatch, The one he wore every day tracked his cognitive responses. I recovered the data from the archival leftovers. It shows that on the day he signed that codicil, his heart rate was in a state of extreme distress and his oxygen levels were low. He wasn't giving you an inheritance. He was having a panic attack because he didn't know who you were. The look on Victoria's face was worth more than every emerald in her jewelry box. It was the look of a woman who realized she'd been outplayed by the very thing she dismissed as useless. "You can't do this," she whispered. "This is my home. Actually, as of 10 minutes ago, it's a contested asset," I said. "You have 30 minutes to pack a single suitcase. Anything else remains here for the court-appointed receivers. And don't worry about the trash in the basement. I've already taken the only things that mattered." As they were escorted to their cars, not their Mercedes or their Range Rovers, which were also seized, but an Uber Julian had to call with his own diminishing bank account, I walked back into the library. The house felt different now. It was cold, yes. It was dark, certainly. But it felt honest. I sat down at my father's desk. I took out my Leica and set it on the mahogany surface. I looked at the empty spaces where the servers used to hum, where the wires used to pulse with the lifeblood of an empire. I mean, the thing is, justice isn't a hammer. It's a scalpel. You don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to know which wire to cut. I opened my laptop and sent one final email to the Sterling Global Board. I offered them a deal. I would buy back the company for 10 cents on the dollar, using the very funds Victoria thought she'd successfully hidden in the offshore accounts Father had left me in the archives. By midnight, I was the sole owner of Sterling Global. I walked down to the sub-basement one last time. It was silent, empty, clean, just a concrete room. But as I stood there, I noticed a small piece of paper that the movers had missed. It was a Polaroid photo tucked into a corner of the molding. It was a photo of me as a little girl, sitting on my father's lap in this very basement, helping him take apart an old clock. On the back, in his shaky late-stage handwriting, it said, "To Sloan, keep the gears moving. Love, Dad." I tucked the photo into my pocket. I didn't cry. I just felt a strange, quiet sense of completion. The inventory was finished. The leftovers were claimed. I walked out of the house and locked the door. As I drove away, I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was behind me. A pile of expensive bricks and a legacy that had finally, mercifully been cleaned. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can find in the trash is the truth. And the truth is, I've always been very, very good at taking out the garbage. Anyway, I have a new project starting tomorrow. A vintage 1930s cinema projector that needs a complete overhaul. It's going to take a lot of patience, a lot of cleaning, and a very steady hand. But I've always been good with the details.